Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where we bring in experts from the franchise community to give you actionable, real advice that's trusted so that you can make the changes in your franchise system that will improve your profitability, help your units to be more successful in the here and then also the hereafter, right? Like getting them to the point where they can really successfully exit. And that's why, if any of you were with us down in Dallas at the Let's Grow event, Pete and I got to sit down and talk, and we started chattering about this gray tsunami, right? This challenge that's in the industry right now, where the what is it? I think it's every day 1.2 million people turn 65 or older in this country. It's crazy. Like the aging demographic is so high, but also I think it's about 40% of all franchises, 35 to 40% are owned by people that are in the boomer age category. So Pete, now the reason I've got Pete on here, guys, it's not just the pretty face, but because he's the president of Moran Family Brands. You guys know there are four automotive franchises in that system. And I'm going to read them so I don't goof them up. But Mr. Transmission, Milex Complete Auto Care, Turbo Tint, and Altamira Automotive Outfitters. And so in that
And
industry, this is a very acute challenge as well, just like in a lot of the home service spaces and some of the high number of franchise units. They tend to age well. And in fact, you were telling me, Pete, one, welcome to the show. I'm going to turn
thank
it
you,
over,
Dave.
let you tell us more about you. But what were you saying? You told me like the average age of your owners is. Do you remember that number offhand?
I think I was talking about the length of time, the longevity that they've been in the system,
Hmm.
and that 33% of our owners have been in for 20 years or more, and 16% have been in for 30 years or more. So that means that they've renewed, a second and in some cases a third time.
That's incredible. And not just survived the 10 years, right? These are renewals. That's incredible work. It also it creates some challenges when it's time for them to exit. And guys, we're gonna jump into this topic in just a minute, but I want you to know if you haven't met Pete, I want you to know why I wanted him here. He's been in franchising since the year before I was born. I just want to highlight that. I mean, legitimately in franchising since 80, right? And so he's been there. He's operated. He's managed. He's grown. He's unfriend. Like he's kind of been in every role. And the reason I thought it would be excellent to have him here is because he's got a lot of experience proactively building systems to help support people exiting franchising. We talk about this all the time. It's a great tool to build generational wealth, but not if people can't exit successfully, right? Not if they don't know how to yield the benefits of all the effort they've poured into that business model. So, Pete, tell us more about you. Tell us a little bit more about the Moran Family Brands and some of your experience in franchise, and then we'll just jump right in to the topic and start laying down some great advice for people.
All right, sure, Dave. Yes, I've been in a long time. I'm not sure I appreciate you giving those dates or the fact that I've been in before you were born. But that's okay. Water under the bridge.
Couldn't help myself.
Um,
Sorry about that, Pete.
no, that's all right. That's all right. Everybody knows I'm old. All they gotta do is look at me.
Well, experienced, right? And they also know I'm
Yeah,
green.
yeah.
I'm green now, so it's kind of like a two-edged sword for me to say it like that.
So yeah, I started in a rapid growth situation in with Jiffy Lube International back when the company was first formed. The corporation was actually formed in December of 79, and I started in March of 80. So I was employee number three or four or something like that.
Wow.
And through that first 10 years that I was there, we went from one store to 1,100. Um, and it was a pretty wild ride. You kind of drank from a fire hose and
Yeah.
never got trained. You got promoted and you got sent on to the next mission, and it was figure it out as you go because we were developing the system as we were moving forward.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty fast pace. Great experience. Fortunately, I had a couple of older mentors who taught me a lot.
Mhm.
And I was able to get in that 10 years get about probably 25 years experience,
No doubt.
forced on you in about a 10-year period, right?
Yeah, I'll bet.
Um, And then to not get pigeonholed as a quick lube guy, I got recruited by a search firm and ended up with what is now Safe Light Auto Glass,
Hmm.
um, and was there for 10 years. And then joined Moran Family of Brands in 1999, so 25 years ago. I've been with Moran for 25 years. And Barb Moran and I have worked closely together over those 25 years and really worked on developing a strong culture that's franchisee centric, you know, and really based on supporting the franchisees and helping them be successful in running their businesses. But also, we recognize too that the systems that we have were acquired, okay, and there
Hmm.
were franchisees that have been in those systems for a while. And we looked at our legacy franchisees and um how long they had been in the system and decided that from a strategy standpoint, besides growing the system and bringing new franchisees in and
Hmm.
helping them be successful, that it was going to be very important for us in particular because of that, demographic we talked about. It was going to be very important for us to help franchisees exit
Yeah.
when it was their time to exit. When you've got 33% that have been in for 20 years or more, you don't want them just saying, "Hey, I'm done," and
Mm.
closing the doors and walking away.
No. What I
So,
mean, because what does that do, right? What does that do to the franchise system? What does it do to the franchise
well, you
success?
spend all this time bringing new franchisees into the system, and then on the other end, if you're not helping them exit with a strong resale program, on the other end, they're closing their doors and leaving, okay,
Hmm.
because they want to retire. You're shrinking your system. You're working hard on this end to grow it, and it's shrinking on the other end, you know.
Yeah.
And so we developed a strong resale program that we implemented, and it's been great. It's been very successful. It's something that I think that more franchisors need to focus on because a lot of franchisors focus on growing the system on the front end, but when it comes to franchisees needing to exit, whether it's retirement or whatever the case may be, they leave it up to the franchisee, and the rule is, we have to approve the buyer.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to find the buyer. Somebody's got to help the franchisee, understand what their business is worth.
Right.
So, there's a lot of steps in the process beforehand
Hmm.
that you have to take care of in order to have a successful resale program. It's not just about approving the buyer.
Right. And in fact,
Um,
sometimes that's the most toxic thing you can do because you're saying,
yeah,
hey, franchise owner who's possibly never sold a business before, go figure it all out. And then we just have to approve these buyers and maybe
right.
terrible terms and a poor valuation. And the value, and believe it or not, these things do matter, right? There are databases that track
Sure.
what franchisees are selling franchises for, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, anyway. I,
And if you just tell them to go find a local broker, there's another set of circumstances you have to deal with then. One that costs them a lot of money.
hmm.
Okay. And two, you're going to get local brokers that bring people to the table that say, yeah, I'm interested in buying that business, but I don't want the franchise. I want to do it as an independent. I want to buy the cash flow.
Not how it works, brother. You know?
That presents a whole nother set of problems. So we found that the best solution is getting out in front of this with a strong program, and executing that program well. And the importance of that is that, it's great to bring new people in.
Hmm.
It's great to support them well during the life cycle of the agreement. Okay. But if you really want to be a responsible franchisor that's promoting a strong small business environment, you're going to help them exit with their equity.
Yeah.
They're building equity over the life cycle of that franchise, and you want to help them exit and realize that equity.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's the promise, right? It's the promise of franchising. And I'm
That's right.
I'm really a big believer in whatever your brand promises, you keep it. And you be careful
Mhm.
how you set it. right? So you can keep
Right,
it. But that's
right.
kind of if you look at franchising as like a brand, right? Even though it's not, that's the brand promise, right? And that's what
Hmm.
franchisors are helping people get into. And people are buying based upon that idea that I'll get into this, I'll invest time and money, be my own boss, create my own cash flow. But also, there's bigger, it's the asset that you're
Yeah.
building that's the real goal here. And I don't know if I shared this with you, but my wife and I just sold our franchises in January. So last month, or I guess that's 2 months ago now. It's
Mhm.
March anyway, but it was I've sold businesses before, so I was a bit unique in that I knew what it was worth. I knew how to go about it.
Mhm.
But the franchisor did have a hand in it in that he said, "Hey, I know somebody who's interested in buying more territories. Why don't you guys talk?" And
Right.
that ended up. I had other people interested in it outside too, but that ended up being the buyer that was the best choice for me for the valuation that we had and also for the customers because to me it was important that I didn't want to hand off my customers to someone who wasn't maybe going to treat them the same way I did.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, but the franchisor played a key role in that, in making an
All,
intro, and obviously they approved the deal, but that was key. That was key.
all the franchisees are concerned with that, um, when in terms of I want my customers taken care of, because they've built that business over a long period of time. I want my employees have been with me a long time. I want somebody who's going to treat my employees right.
Yeah.
I had one of my franchisees about 2 years ago that had been in with us for 38 years, and he was ready to retire, and he gave me that whole speech, of I'm not just going to sell this to anybody. They got to take care of my customers. They got to know this market. They got to take care of my employees. And and so we took this candidate through the process, and when we were ready to present him to the seller, um, because we knew he was qualified and all that. We had them take a Zoracle profile test, and we matched them up with their top performing franchisees. And it's interesting, this guy matched up perfectly with the franchisee who was selling.
Oh, well, that's
And
a great idea.
so we finally introduced them on a Saturday afternoon, and they met. And the franchisee called me, said, I just met with this guy for 3.5 hours. He said, he's perfect. He said he's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the transaction did take place, and the new franchisees, but he's been in there now for 2 years. But my franchisee who was selling still calls me every week. He's been out of the system now for 2 years. He still calls me every week because of the relationship.
Yeah, that's telling. It's telling, and not a shocker for me, having known you for a while now and watched how you operate. Um, franchisors, there's so much more to this, right? And the fact that you and Barb have got such a franchisee success-centric organization, I'm not surprised to hear any of this from you because it creates successful franchise owners who do renew, right? That's the short-term, midterm goals of a franchisor is let's bring on the right people who will then grow their business, who will then renew their agreement and continue growing the business, maybe buy more territories, expand become leaders in the FAC, whatever, right? But when you're thinking in the long term about your franchise owners and this partnership you have with them, you care enough to say we need to invest in this process.
Yeah.
And part of what you've described, there are a few aspects to this that you and I have talked about. One, just knowing kind of the general expirations. Like you have to know when people are coming up because that's about the time that sometimes there's some burnout. Sometimes they're aging or they got to take care of an aging parent or they just they've worked a long time before they bought a franchise so they could have enough money to buy one. So how do you guys gauge kind of the circumstances of your franchise owners and know when it's best to approach them about maybe a resale opportunity, or can you give us some guidance from your
So I'll
experience in
show
that?
you something, Dave. I'm going to reach over here to the corner of my desk, okay? And this is our franchise expiration report. It stays right there on the corner of my desk, 365 days a year, okay? So
Yeah.
when we're budgeting and we're planning, okay, part of my budgeting process is I'm looking at this renewal and expiration report, okay? And at least a year in advance, we start contacting the people who are coming up for renewal
Hmm. Nice.
to lay out a plan. Do you, a year from now, you're scheduled to expire. Do you let's talk about a strategy. Do
Hmm.
you plan on renewing? Do you want to list it? Sometimes resales take a while to happen for the transaction to take place. So if you think you want to exit and sell, then you should list it with us now. Okay. And I make those phone calls. I have those conversations with the franchisees that are coming up. So I'm looking at that list all the time and determining who and when I have to call.
Yeah. And I just want to pause and make sure everyone's just taking note of this. Pete is an exceptionally talented guy, and he's got a lot on his plate, four brands underneath him. And if this is a top priority for him where it sits on the corner of his desk, like this isn't staged, like that was legitimately sitting on the corner of his desk, and they're planning a year in advance. Most companies that I talk to, they're thinking about renewals about 90 days before expiration.
Too
That tends
late.
to be the case. Yeah, you're way too
Too
late.
late.
If you got to clean up a P&L so somebody can have a good valuation for an exit, way too late, right?
You
Um,
know, when you talk about the P&Ls, Dave, and most people are coming in or a lot of people are coming in and getting an SBA loan.
mhm,
That means for an existing business, you got to have 3 years of P&Ls, 3 years of tax returns, and those P&Ls need to show solid cash flow where they can pay the loan back.
mhm.
Okay. Otherwise, the transaction won't take place.
Well, and
Okay.
what's the
So
there's
sometimes, you always have that double-edged sword, right? Where people will put expenses into their P&L to avoid paying taxes. And that's
yes.
fine when you want to avoid paying taxes. But the other edge of that sword is when it's time to sell and you've done that, you
Hmm.
have a valuation problem.
Yes, you do. Yes,
Okay.
you do.
So
Yeah.
you gotta pick your strategy here. Do you want to save on taxes or do you want to, get a good valuation when it's time to sell the business? You know,
Oh yeah.
so uh, that's a critical factor. And sometimes I've had people come to me and say, "Hey, I think I want to sell," and I'll look at their P&Ls and say, "It's going to take you a couple of years to clean these up."
Yeah. Yeah.
You
You're
know,
right.
so
Even
sometimes you have to work with them to get those P&Ls, presentable
hmm
to the lender.
100%. Well, if you want to maximize the valuation of your business, right?
Right.
That's the challenge. And most people are using SBAs. And as much as I dislike them, we had one, it was such a pain in the butt. And I was like, I should have just gone conventional, dang it. But I didn't know at the time. I should
Yeah.
have had better advice. But the reality is that there's also going to be a pretty tight valuation multiple on that. It's going to be a multiple of EBITDA, usually three to four
Right.
X, depends on the industry, maybe two and a half if it depends upon
Hmm.
the space, right? So
Right.
that gives you a pretty good rule of thumb to know whatever my EBITDA is, multiply that by two and a half to four
Yep.
X on the high end. That's going to be what SBA is going to reasonably loan against the value of my business. And
That's
if you
right.
and so if you're not setting that expectation also, some people are like, well, I'm cash flowing lots of money out of the business, is paying all these bills and my truck and this and that. Cool, but your EBITDA is $50,000 on a $2
Hmm.
million operating revenue budget.
Right.
Your business is worth, 250 grand if you were
Right.
lucky, right?
That's right. That's
It
right.
doesn't matter how much benefit you're pulling out of it personally. That's a tax avoidance strategy. It's yeah. I just want to make sure
Hmm.
we're reiterating what you're saying because that's why
Yeah.
most people have to start this process a year or two in advance to get ready to sell.
And then let's face it too, we're talking, a lot of what we talked about here is in terms of people exiting when it's their time to exit. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, Life happens. Okay. And it's not always a planned event.
Yeah, that's
Okay. You have a franchisee who's in the middle of their life cycle and they get sick or their spouse gets sick or they have a death in the family or they have to go take care of elderly parents or they're getting a divorce.
hmm
You know, those things all happen. We're a microcosm of society and franchising, and whatever's happening out there is going to happen to us as well.
hmm Right.
So um, it's not all resale program is not all about having this plan that works perfectly. And when the guy's 75 years old, you sell his business and he retires and he gets a nice check.
hmm
Okay.
Right.
These other life events happen. which can seriously impact the business. And sometimes you have to move quickly to save a location because of one of these life events.
Yeah. Tell me, how have you done that? I mean, I have zero experience in that. I've just sold my own franchise, but uh, obviously there's a weird anomaly in franchise development. I see it all the time that there's a much higher than normal likelihood that somebody that's in that process is probably a caretaker for the family, the most financially solvent person in their
Mhm.
immediate circle. So they end up picking up the burdens of all these things that come in the family. Like, hey, mom and dad are sick. Okay, I'll go take care of them. Or my cousin broke his knee, or he's in rehab. Okay, I'll write the check. So, but this is super real. How do you handle it? What are some tips and wisdom you could share with people who haven't been through that before?
I think it starts with one thing in particular, and this is maybe a cultural thing for us. But I think it starts with really knowing your franchisees. We know our franchisees, we know their kids, we know their spouses, you
Hmm.
know. Um, we provide I think a pretty good amount of support to the franchisees so we know um, their circumstances.
Hmm.
Okay. And we
Yeah.
know when some of these events are occurring in their lives, like if they're having marital trouble or if somebody in their family is sick. And so by knowing that, um, it gives you the ability to anticipate potential problems. If the situation starts getting serious, you can take a look at that situation and say, I'm not liking the way this is developing. And in order to help them out, I may need to get ahead of this. And you have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's having some difficult conversations, but if you're going to protect the system and protect your franchisees,
Hmm.
you got to have some of those conversations. Um, and a lot of times they're positive conversations. I had one just the other day with a franchisee who's having some health concerns, you know,
Yeah.
and he said, I don't really want to sell, I don't want to leave the business, but um, my family history is not good in terms of longevity,
Hmm.
you know, for males in my family,
Yeah.
and I don't want to leave my wife in a situation where everything isn't taken care of. So I think I need to be proactive. How can you help me?
Hmm. What a great
That
franchise
was
owner.
that was a conversation I had last week.
Yeah, a sad conversation to have, and yet what a good one.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting
Well,
them.
sad in some ways, but also positive in that hey, if that's where you're at in your life and that's what you want to do, then I'm going to help you do it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to see you go. I don't want to see you exit the system. But if that's what you need, then I'm going to help you get there.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what a franchisor's role is. And we say these terms like protect the system, right, or what's good for the system. There's real power in having strong neighbors in franchising, right? Especially in your world, right? If you've got an excellent neighbor up the road and down the road and east and west of you, it actually makes your franchise operate better. The reputation grows across the board.
Mhm.
Marketing dollars go further. There's so many values of having a strong franchise network. And so when you have somebody who
Absolutely.
can't be, for whatever reason, divorce or illness or even poor management, those things happen too.
Sure.
It's better for everyone around that person to have them replaced with someone
Hmm.
who's going to operate better.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Sometimes the resale program is important as well when, you just mentioned somebody who's not a good operator,
Mhm.
you have those situations sometimes as well where you've got somebody who's underperforming
Mhm.
and all of your support efforts and trying to coach them up and get them to make the right moves just don't seem to be working.
Mhm.
So, you end up determining that it's probably a fit issue, and you have that, difficult discussion that, hey, look, um, it's not working for you financially, so let's work towards a common goal where we're able to get somebody in who can who can grow this business,
Mhm.
okay, and you're able to get out and minimize your financial damage.
Yeah.
You have obligations
Right.
and I want to get you out from under those obligations because you're not understanding what moves you need to make in order to really grow this business.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate. And yet,
It is.
I had a conversation with a legacy brand. They've been around for 40 plus years, and they've got a lot of folks that they're making enough money. They're the
Mhm.
bottom, probably 25% performers, but they've been around, sometimes one, two renewals, and they're kind of tired. And so they're not really growing the business anymore. It's shrinking a little bit, but they're like, I'm making enough money, who cares? That's not a good position either for the franchise system. So how have you approached folks like that? I mean,
Well,
it's a sensitive thing to bring
you
that up to
know,
someone.
you bring up an interesting point there, Dave. When as we were approaching this period that we just went through, to where we've had several resale situations with very successful legacy franchisees.
Hmm.
I have to tell you that approaching that period and seeing that these guys, 78 years old and 80 years old and 83 years
Crazy.
old, and very, very successful stores. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you that I wasn't scared, okay?
Mhm. I'll bet.
Because you have these franchisees that have been in for 30 and 40 years and running some of your top tier, franchises in the system. And how am I going to find somebody who is going to carry the ball
Hmm.
and maintain the store, you know,
Right.
and be able to run it as good as this franchisee has run it for the last 35 years,
Hmm.
you know? And I have to tell you, that was, you know, I had some angst over that, you know.
I'll bet.
Um,
Yeah.
and fortunately, I can tell you that, interestingly enough, the franchisees that we brought in to purchase some of these legacy stores have brought some new ideas and some new energy and some new blood. And almost every one of them, the numbers are up from where they were when they bought these top performing stores.
Yeah.
I had one guy who, God, I loved him. I sold him the store 23 years ago, talked him into buying the real estate 20 years ago, and then sold it for him a year ago, for a good amount of money, and was concerned that nobody would be able to run it as well as he did. And the new guy came in and is just on fire, and he's up 30%.
Holy cow. Yeah.
You
And
know,
and
so
and if you
and
think
he's
about it,
and he's looking at buying two more.
that's fantastic.
You know,
Yeah,
so
I think about this kind of like a bullpen. If you're a baseball guy at all, Pete, that it doesn't matter if he's had five good innings, arm's tired, right? Arm's tired.
mhm,
Sometimes it's the best thing you can do in the inning is put a new arm on the mound
yeah,
and you'll light him up at the plate. And this is a great example of that. That I think a
yeah,
lot of franchisors they share your fear of how's anyone going to be as good as Lee Sheridan? How's anyone going to be good as Dave Hansen was or Pete Baldine, whoever it was
yeah,
that was
yeah.
killing that territory? But the reality is someone just came in and wrote a big check or got a big loan and they are as motivated on day one there as he was on day one, right?
But I think too that you've got to have a strong process, okay,
Hmm.
and um, you've got to really vet these candidates, okay, and you've got to be willing to send candidates that aren't the right fit down the road,
Hmm.
okay. Like my franchise development people know that, um, we do discovery day at the end of the process.
Hmm.
Okay. And they know that they better have vetted the people that aren't a good fit out and not invite them to discovery day, because the people that are coming to discovery day ought to be people that we can legitimately approve,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
yeah, and
So having a process to vet these candidates uh, kind of ensures that you're bringing in solid candidates that will take the ball and run with it.
I agree. You mentioned this before, but a lot of brands just kind of willy-nilly say, hey, if you want to sell, go ahead and sell. Right. And the franchisor not being involved, you're a machine. You've got the processes, the tools. You mentioned Zoracle. I mean, God bless Rebecca for creating such a good tool, right? That helps you vet high performing candidates, right? But But the franchisee doesn't have that. They don't have the experience
Yeah.
vetting high quality candidates. So it's like it seems like such a no-duh thing to me to say, let us use this machine, this engine, the equipment we've already built, this process and systems with professionals with 20 years of experience. Let us help you vet people so that your legacy continues on, even though you're not part of it anymore, right?
You just mentioned Rebecca. You said God bless Rebecca, and man, I will second that. If I can give Rebecca a plug, this Eclipse report that she has with the spot on profile
Mhm.
is amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. We use it. We use it for everyone. We've had her build the algorithms for our top performing franchisees. We've
Mhm.
had them build them for managers and also for our support staff.
Yeah. Perfect.
Very valuable program.
Yeah, and so you're using this as a way to make sure you have another layer because you're talking to people and
Mhm.
considering them, but there's some point in the process where you say, okay, now let's see how you line up against
Right.
statistically highest performing franchisees in terms
Hmm.
of kind of
Yeah.
makeup and psyche, and that's been a real asset for you guys. It sounds like as you.
And yeah, it really is. And we don't use it as the decision maker. It's not a
Mhm.
yes or no based on the score. We use it to learn about the candidate. We want to know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, where we might need to shore up training if we approve them.
Mhm.
So we use it for just to get a much better understanding of them as an individual and how they'll work.
Yeah.
And it's even part of the process in terms of, hey, you may not be the strongest salesperson, so we're going to recommend when you hire your manager that you hire somebody that's really strong in sales because you're not,
Mhm. Yeah.
you
Yep.
know. So,
It's perfect. No, and a long time ago in the HR world, they started doing kind of top grading and they started using more assessment tools to figure out, are you a fit for the role? And
mhm,
everyone's probably done Myers-Briggs or the DISC assessment or things like
right.
that. But I came from that world a little bit. I was in the industry certification and psychometric world for a while. And so when I first met Rebecca, she and I nerded out about that. And she's like, you know what a psychometrician is? I'm like, oh yeah. And so I've loved what she's done forever, just because I know
Yeah.
how valuable it's been in the rest of the world, and
Hmm.
franchising's catching up now and like figuring out, hey, these tools can really help us create reliable results on the
Right.
candidate selection, which creates reliable
Hmm.
results on the franchise operations, which means units are more successful and the system's
Right.
healthier. So it's just a win-win-win.
So if you're watching, Rebecca, thanks for all the help.
Yeah, you're awesome. I agree. Hey, let's so I want to talk about something, maybe the twist of this topic, which is what happens if you don't, right? There are a lot of people I know right now that are struggling with aging franchise owners or people that are burning out, or I think about a brand I went to their conference for years in a row, and there's the same guy tying up an amazing market. In fact, I'm not going to say the brand. He was in the Houston market. He'd bought up a couple of territories,
Hmm.
most of the city. Huge, successful market for pretty much any brand. He'd come to conference, he would just mope and complain, and he wasn't investing in the market. He wasn't really keeping up his end of the deal. So this whole Houston market was pretty much underwater. And and I talked to brands that have a lot of underperformers and all or the aging folks, doesn't matter, but if they don't put together a program, if they continue to operate status quo, like yeah, you go find somebody, you buy whatever, we'll prove them. What do you see as the long-term effects? What have you seen, Pete? You've coached and mentored and talked to lots of other brands that haven't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question, Dave. And um, here's how we look at that. So our core values are dedication, respect, integrity, vision, and the E stands for engagement. Okay.
Mhm.
It used to stand for enthusiasm, and about a year ago, so we use the traction system, Gino Wickman's
Mhm.
traction management system.
Oh
We've
yeah,
been
for sure. Yeah.
using it for about 11 years. And so every quarter, we look at those core values and we ask a lot of questions and we say, is our mission right? Are our core values right? So we challenge them all the time. And most of the time, we've always said, yeah, it's right. That's where we want to keep them. And about a year ago, we said, franchisee engagement is maybe one of the most critical things. And so we changed our enthusiasm core value to engagement.
Hmm.
And that helped us focus on those types of franchisees who maybe aren't engaged, who are complaining, who are, just kind of doing their own thing. And how do we pull them back in? How do we get them engaged? How do we get them talking to other franchisees, working with our support teams and our franchise business coaches to counter that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
And so I think we've had some success, in doing that, and we've done a lot of peer group meetings and owners meetings to where we facilitate getting these franchisees sharing more information and sharing their successes and
Yeah.
talking about the problems that they're having and helping solve problems. And I think that that engagement is probably the answer to what you were just talking about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, if at all possible, I think everyone deserves the dignity of the coaching, right? The investment.
Mhm.
They deserve
Yep.
that. And there will be times where you have folks that they're just not going to respond to that. And the reality is they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
I had a CEO of a brand I was talking to, and I asked him, so what do you do? Like when that comes up, he's like, I call him. I get on the phone. And I say,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Steve, uh, this isn't going as either one of us thought it would, is it? And I was like, oh, you say that? He's like, oh yeah. How do they respond? He's like, they always say the same thing. Like, nope, it's not. And he's like, and then we figure out what the next step is. And
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
that's the moment where they say, you're right. I'm going to get on board and I'm going to follow the process and get my business coach to call me and we'll work. Or they say, yeah, I just want to get my money back and I just want to get it. And that's okay. Like that's
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the game plan, it's engagement plan,
Yeah.
right? And working with, but it doesn't always work, right?
Right.
And so when it's not working, and we're having our weekly meetings and talking about the different franchisees and where they're at. Um, when you feel like you're beating your head against the wall, that's when they'll come to me and say, "What do you think about seeing if so and so wants to sell?"
Hmm.
And then I'll make that call, and have that decision. And it's not that where you have to look at it as somebody exiting is a bad thing.
Hmm.
You know,
No.
it can be the right thing for both of you.
Yeah, ideally, they're
Yeah.
walking away with a little extra in their pocket, so
Right.
it turned out to be a positive investment. But
Hmm.
also, if they're unhappy operating the business, the last thing you want them to feel is trapped for another 5 years,
Right.
until their
Right.
contract expires. That's not going to
Hmm.
create a good culture.
Right.
And to your point, it's not going to create positive engagement. It might be a
And
sort of
then,
engagement, but
you
not the
know,
type of engagement you want.
what happens at that trigger point in 5 years when the contract expires? Then what do, right? Do you just let it expire and you enforce the non-compete? So if you're going to get to that point where you got the expiration coming up in 5 years, talk about it now.
Yeah.
Talk about that 5-year plan and say, hey, do you really want to do this for the next 5 years?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
or should we work up a plan that benefits both of us?
Yeah, agreed. I know a brand that does every year they do an annual assessment with each owner, and as
Mhm.
part of that they say, here's your estimated value of your business based upon your P&Ls, and what's your goal? Are we going to grow this thing? Is it time to think about selling this thing, or
Right,
what?
right.
Regardless of their renewal dates, that's an annual process,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
kind of sets that culture, makes it easy when they're like, I'm tired. Or
Mhm.
my kids are getting grown. I've got to be at more soccer games. That whatever that is. And
Right.
sometimes the answer isn't sell. It's no, 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 Steve. Let's help you get a manager trained up so you can start working less in the business and more on the business. Like,
Hmm.
it doesn't always have to be a seller or be sold kind of discussion.
Right, right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Well,
I think the thing that's been exciting for us is seeing all these legacy guys who have really built strong businesses, um, and really developed, nice solid incomes over the years, now be able to exit, at whatever age,
yeah,
and and get that equity out of the business. That's kind of the reward. And in some cases, they bought the real estate and they're hanging on to the real estate and they're leasing it to the new guy, so they've got that income stream, uh, coming in from the real estate, and that is kind of the icing on the cake with the whole franchise relationship, is when you can get there, with these people who have just done a great job in your system,
Hmm.
and see them get those rewards.
Oh, I'll bet.
And the interesting thing, Dave, is that when I got here 25 years ago, Barb and I hit the road visiting franchisees, and this is kind of funny. Uh, we got to certain franchise stores, and we'd walk in and ask for the franchisee, and he'd say, "Well, he hadn't been here for a year. I bought this from him a year ago."
Oh,
You know, so resales were taking place that the franchisor didn't even know about,
oh shoot.
right? That happened three, four, five times,
Oh, dang.
where there were franchisees and we didn't even have the right franchisee's name, at the time,
Yikes.
and where it's evolved to over the years with this is now, when the franchisees think that they want to sell, the first thing they do is they pick up the phone, they call me, and they say, "Hey, I think I'm ready. What do I need to do?"
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's gone from one extreme to the other. To where they're, when they're ready, they call me and we work up a plan.
I love it. Well, and guys, anyone listening in, I think you get the idea, right? But there's a way to approach this, and changing your culture so it's a topic of discussion. It's most people's end game anyway. I think you can take a lot of the plays out of this playbook from Pete and the team at Moran Family of Brands, and just lessons he's learned over the years that he's now implemented and now becoming part of the culture. What a shift away from what I think a lot of folks are struggling with. And as you're a young brand trying to build this into the plan. Annual
Mhm.
assessments, constant discussions, talk about it at conference. Like make sure there's a playbook internally to get people from launched to successful to not managing the business to multiple territories to exiting. Like it's your job as a franchisor to create that playbook so that your franchisees can have multi-unit, multi-generational success and an eventual exit or a transition. We didn't get to talk about that, but the next generation transition plan, boy, oh boy, like that one, sometimes the real train wreck if it's not done right. It's just thrown off into the next generation who didn't want it in the first place.
Dave, a lot of times at conferences, I get, when we get into a resale discussion, um, people will ask, I've been asked this question 100 times if I've been asked it once, and they'll say, so being that you have this resale program, when do you talk to the franchisees about your resale program? And I just laugh and I say, I talk to my franchisees about the resale program in discovery day
Hmm.
before they become franchisees.
That's so smart.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talk about, the support structure and how we're going to help them get started and get up and running. We talk about the life cycle of the franchise, and we talk about the exit in discovery day before they ever sign.
Yeah. That, I love it. I love it. That's the
You know,
best time to set the
because
agenda.
it's part of the culture. It's part of the process. You know, and
Hmm.
you'd be surprised at how many of them where that actually makes a difference. Where many of them say, "Wow, it's good to know that when it's time, or if something happens, that I've got a franchisor that can help me with the exit."
Yeah. Well, you're in their corner.
Yeah,
That's the whole point.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the funny thing is that in the selling process and this process of helping people find a franchise, if you're the only one talking about that, even if other brands might support them, the perception is that you're the only one that's doing it, right?
Mhm.
So it's important to, we do a 305 point inspection every oil change. Well, if nobody else is advertising that, it
Yeah.
seems like nobody else is doing an inspection at an oil change, right? So
Mhm.
it's really important just psychologically. I love that you do that. That's the
Right.
right time to set the agenda that we're in your corner
Mhm.
from day one to day 10 years, right? And
Right.
we're 30 or 40 years in your case, it sounds like, Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Well, Pete, you've been great. If somebody wanted to reach out to you just to pick your brain about the topic, what's the best way for them to find you and reconnect, Pete?
Yeah, my email is pbaldine, Baldine,
Mhm.
just like it is on the screen there, at Moran Brands, Moran, moranbrands.com. Or my phone number is 708-297-2240.
Well, you're a good man. I was expecting you to say, just hit me up on LinkedIn, but that's even
Oh,
better.
that too. That too.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn every day, you know,
Yeah.
but I'm not shy about giving out my contact information.
Yeah. Well, you're a good man to share the time. That's one thing I love about this industry is the folks that have done it for a while that have figured things out, they're happy to share. It's not like that in a lot of other industries. It's a real gem of what I've found as I've gotten into this industry.
It's one of the things I absolutely love about franchising, you know, and I mentioned having mentors, being that I'm one of the older guys, right, that's been
Mhm.
around, you
A
know,
couple
and
years. Yeah.
and having my I mentioned my older mentors. What's fun now is I still have mentors, okay, but my mentors now are in their 30s and 40s, okay, because I need to learn what they know. I know the stuff that my older mentors taught me. I got all that down, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what do these new people in franchising that are in their 30s and 40s know that I need to know? Technology wise, marketing wise,
Mhm.
and that's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah, I love that. Well,
Yeah.
especially when you surround yourself by guys like Graham and others who know a little bit, like, boy, like you got some good people in your corner that are happy. I'm sure happy to help you out because I'm sure you've lifted
Yeah.
them too, Pete.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, I just want to thank you again. Thanks for making time to record. We'll have to snag you again at some point because there's a lot of things we could pull out of that experience pool you've got. But thanks again.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Dave. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, same.